it all came down to a Google search. So I had been on service or medical mission trips with a previous organization, and I was just looking for other opportunities for a trip to Central America that I could take the students on that had a medical focus. So I was just Googling, and I think I Googled like service, medical mission, Central America or something, and Hope for Kids came up. So then I, read through the whole website and I was like, yeah, I think that this could definitely work. And I sent Amy a giant list of questions. And I was kind of like, well, I don't know, because I had done this with other organizations too. And I wasn't sure if she would get back to me right away or if at all, because some organizations didn't get back to me. But of course, Amy got back to me right away with very thorough answers to every single one of my little nitty gritty questions. So we just kept in contact. I kept on asking her more and more questions. And then I was like, I think this could really work out well. So that's how I got involved, and that was in the fall of 2016. That I was a little bit nervous just because I hadn't been on a trip before with Hope for Kids, and nobody I knew had been on a trip before. But I think almost immediately once we all got there, like I realized I had no reason to be nervous at all because everything was really well organized. Everyone was very welcoming and warm, and everyone just integrated really quickly together. And it was apparent, like, it was really well organized, well thought out. And I think that not to say that all um, organizations aren't like this, but with Hope for Kids, I felt like the level of care that um, the organization shows for the people on the trip was apparent right away. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, we need to serve these people and I don't really care about you, which, but there was like a big level of care for the students and getting to know them and addressing any needs that they had, which weren't a lot. But and then also, like, I felt right away that there was a level of connection with the people on the ground um, in Guatemala and the different places, and like it wasn't just like a one-time thing. It was like a long-standing partnership. So that I think that made us feel all really safe too, that we were kind of going into an environment where it was a friendly environment and our all of the potential things that could happen were kind of at least thought about so that there was plans in place or contingencies in place if anything were to happen. But it was just it was just really really like a good experience right from the get-go. Like everything worked out really well, and I mean that wasn't necessarily the case on other trips that I have been on. I've taken primarily pharmacy students on the trip, so while they're on the trip they're spending most of their time in the pharmacy, so they learn to kind of see how to um, I don't know, a pharmacy would function in a medical mission trip, which is very different than what they would see while working in the United States. But it does give them the opportunity to apply all of that classroom knowledge in a real life setting. Also gives them an opportunity to practice using a translator, which is an essential
Mm.
skill for many, well, almost all pharmacists. Um, they'll probably have to do that at least, on a weekly basis, if not daily basis, depending on where they end up practicing. So I think that definitely a bonus. The other bonus is that well, there's several, but another bonus is that they get to work and shadow with the medical providers. And so Dr. Amy Stone often has the students shadow with her, so they get to work with a physician. And then sometimes also they work in the nursing station too. So um, interprofessional education is a really big thing in pharmacy and in medical and nursing education too. So this trip gives them the opportunity to have some exposure with interprofessional experiences. So I think that's really invaluable. The other thing that I think is somewhat unique to this trip is that they get to experience so many different cultures because we're not just in one part of Guatemala, we're in, three other parts. So a very urban setting in Escuintla, and then a more rural setting in San Miguel, and then working out of Panajachel, we'll go to Jaibalito, so that's a Mayan village that's only accessible by boat, and then Santa Catarina, where a lot of the patients that are coming to the clinic, they don't speak Spanish, but they speak Quechucal. So working with two translators in that instance. So I think that's really invaluable to see all the different parts of Guatemala and get a flavor of how um, you know how we can serve these different groups. So someone that's very culturally different, and then someone that's rural and in an urban setting as well. So, and each group of patients has different challenges. So learning kind of a little bit about the challenges that they have, and then how we can help address those challenges, because the medical diagnoses are a little bit different between clinics as well too. So you can kind of see what's more prevalent in each of those communities. I think that helping organize these trips and serving in the pharmacy on these trips has definitely expanded my own understanding of clinical pharmacy. So, selfishly, it has definitely helped me, I think, be able to explain some of all that nitty gritty science that I talk about on a daily basis in a way that the students will remember, because I can talk about things that I've seen, or just having that knowledge of, like, okay, this is how this medication is actually used. So I teach a little bit about, like, the parasites and the worms and things like that. So I talk about the pharmacology of those medications, but now I can also relate that back to, like, oh, well, you might not see this in the US that much, but you might see it in, depending on if you're in another part of the world. So that has definitely been impactful for me. But I think probably the most impactful aspect of these trips for me in terms of being a professor is really making those connections with the students and seeing the students grow while they're on this trip. So the first clinic, everyone seems a little bit hesitant. They're kind of scared. They don't know what to do. They need a little bit more coaching. But then towards the end, I'm pretty much hands off. They know what to do. They're running the whole show, and they're just gaining a lot of confidence, not only in their pharmacy knowledge, but also with their communication skills and their empathy. Like, we sometimes see or hear about some really challenging situations, and I think that they get more and more comfortable with that. They're not shying away from it. They really want to dive in and help any way that they can. So I think that's probably, like, the biggest impact it has had on me, is really being able to interact with my students and see them grow in that way. My class sizes, usually they're kind of big, so I might not get to know the students on a personal level just when I'm in the classroom, but going on these trips, I definitely do. And so I really like that. And I like that almost every single student that has been on this trip says that they want to come back, that they want to do a this trip again, or they want to do another one again. So I love that this trip kind of serves as a catalyst for this passion for lifelong service for the students. I really love that too. I think it's really powerful for them to see that, even though, and I know that this is something that Amy talks about a lot, like, even though, like, they might not be able to fix everything for that patient, like, they can make a difference by just being there and providing, like, you know, simple medications to them, but also, like, giving them the dignity, like, showing, like, okay, you are important. We have these doctors, nurses, pharmacy students, pharmacists that are coming, and they want to help you. So, like, allowing them to have kind of like somewhat of a first world pharmacy experience in a not a first world setting. I think that is impactful to the patients, but also showing the students like, hey, I can really make a difference, you know, by just being here. And I see that some of the students now come back to Rochester, which definitely has some needs, and then they want to go out and serve people in Rochester that have, some, not, I wouldn't say exactly the same challenges, but similar challenges to some of the patients they've seen in Guatemala, so that they really have a heart for serving those that really need the help, and they don't want to just be comfortable in their suburban pharmacies. They want to go out there and really help those that need it the most. Um, I think just another thing that is always inspiring to me is the connections that the students make with the kids. So, I was just on a trip, and some of the students posted pictures of, them with one child, and someone who was on the trip like 4 years ago was like, oh, is that this child? And they're like, yes, like, because they remembered all of the interactions that they had with that particular child, and they were still impacted by it. So 4 years later, they see a picture of the same child and they're like, oh, is that this child? He's so much older, he's so grown up. So I think that that's really inspiring too, that even though we're not there for a long period of time, that you still can make those connections